This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge. From worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion, probably the only podcast that brings you the best of both worlds, horse racing and cricket. I'm your host, Stephen Wallace. As we continue our countdown to the Women's Ashes, it's day 4 of our special series. So far, we've heard insights from Jane Powell, Tina Gough and Chloe Hill. Today, it's the turn of Rosa Simkin, the voice behind Rosa Talks Ball. Rosa is here to share her thoughts on the 7-match multi-format series, which begins this weekend. Rosa delves into the preparations of both teams, analyses the squads, and highlights the players who could shape the outcome of this much-anticipated contest. But she's not alone. Joining her are a lineup of global experts, including Jane Powell, Tina Gough, Chloe Hill, John Aaron, Sue Strachan, and Yas Daswani. Together they give their predictions for the final result of the series. And that's not all. Rosa also takes the time to discuss some of the biggest talking points in women's cricket right now. It's a packed episode you won't want to miss. Hello Rosa, welcome back to the Paddock and the Pavilion. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me back.
How was your Christmas?
It was good, thank you. A bit quieter than usual with a few less family members about, but we had a lovely time. How was yours?
Yes, good, thank you. Yeah, quiet one went to my mum's on Christmas Day and saw my dad on Christmas Day and had New Year with my partner. So, yes, quiet but enjoyable festive period. Are you ready for some Ashes chat?
I am indeed. It's my favourite part of the year, the Women's Ashes.
And are you excited?
I'm excited, but also a little bit terrified. But we'll get onto that in a bit.
Yeah, we will. We've got lots to get through. I've got 6 other cricket experts to join us with their thoughts on the 2025 Women's Ashes. And we're going to cover preparation, the format, key players, get your predictions, and we're going to throw a bit of cricket news in towards the end on this podcast to talk about the 2025 Women's Ashes. To start with, I just wanted to just go back a bit to 2023 and talk about the history of the Women's Ashes. And in 2023, it was 8 all. We've got the same captains in 2025. What were your memories of 2023?
I mean, I think the Test match was a highlight. Obviously, 5 days, which was a miracle, but brilliant. And it was really tight until England's second batting innings, where we kind of collapsed a bit. But I think the 2 standout performances from that game have to be Tammy Beaumont's 208 and Sophie Ecclestone taking a casual 10 for 192. Obviously, with the injury to Nat Sciver-Brunt during that Test match, as you'd say, Sophie Ecclestone was plugged in at one end pretty much. So she bowled a ridiculous number of overs. So I think that was definitely my standout.
Yes, England lost the Test match by 89 runs, but Nat Sciver-Brunt did bounce back with 2 centuries in the ODIs.
She did, one of them bringing England so close to that second ODI win and the great escape, because after England lost the first 2 games, the Test match and the first T20 at Edgbaston, they had to win all of the remaining games to get back the Ashes. But the only caveat in that was that's 2 T20s and 3 ODIs. and they came close apart from that one ODI. But it was an unbelievable series, especially the alignment with the men's Ashes.
Yes, we have them both on at the same time. 8-all finish. A series that began back in 1934, the 28th of December 1934 at Brisbane. England won the first ever Test match by 9 wickets. We got the Women's Ashes trophy in 1998, and this particular Ashes is going to see the first Women's Ashes Test at the MCG since 1949.
I mean, for me, the Women's Ashes is women's cricket heritage. It's one of the standout fixtures / series which has gone on since near the beginning of women's English cricket. And to play a test this year at the MCG, also a day-night test, is extremely exciting.
A few more statistics. We've had 25 series. Australia have won 10, England won 6, and there's been 9 draws. And in Australia, there's been 12 series. Australia winning 6, England 3, and there's been 3 drawn. So it's going to be hard for England to win in Australia.
I mean, if there's anyone's backyard in women's cricket that you don't want to go and play in, I think it's Australia's. But hopefully we can turn those statistics around this time with a very different squad from the last Ashes series, and also very different circumstances. So we will see.
Yes, last time we were in some form of COVID bubble, I think, in 21-22 when they went to Australia.
We were, and from what I remember, it wasn't our best performances. I mean, we had Kate Cross batting out that draw in the Test match, which I think is probably the memory a lot of people will think about, but it's very different, obviously, especially from a crowd point of view, to go from such strict COVID regulations to a test at the MCG is quite the jump.
Yes, I think it's time we've heard now from our first guest. We're going to hear from Chloe Hill, the Worcestershire captain and wicketkeeper, formerly of the South East Stars, and this is what she had to say about the Ashes.
And I think the women's Ashes really, it's like the pinnacle of the women's game. It's where they get the most views. It's and obviously being in Australia as well, how they support women's cricket out there. It's all on the TV. So many people can watch it. I think it's going to be so exciting.
The pinnacle of women's cricket then, Rosa?
I mean, I don't disagree. And I particularly agree with Chloe's comments regarding the level of cricket in Australia and the support that they have shown for women's cricket. I mean, they have been at such a professional standard for years and years and years before we have in England. And hopefully this series works as a symbol for how far women's cricket has come, both in Australia and more globally.
Is it being squeezed out a bit by the WPL? Is that becoming ever powerful?
I think it is and it isn't. I think obviously the IPL has a lot of control in men's T20 cricket, but there's a lot less opportunity still for playing opportunities for women. And also the women's cricketers from India have more opportunity to go over and play in other franchise tournaments compared to the men. So I think, obviously, from a salary point of view, the IPL is the pinnacle now, and women's players, of course, want to grab a contract. The crowds are incredible. The atmosphere is incredible. It's an incredible thing to be a part of. But I don't think it's necessarily draining cricket elsewhere just yet. But there's a risk if the WBBL 100, etc., don't begin to catch up, that they will start falling more dramatically behind, especially as more women's leagues are introduced to keep up with the demand.
Because we're going to come on to the length of the series shortly, but let's talk about preparation and my next guest, who is Sue Strachan. She's the ex-president of Scottish Cricket and also a Scottish and Fairbreak manager. And this is what Sue had to say.
And I think that England will have gained a lot by being out in South Africa. I think they will have, hopefully, whatever went wrong in the T20 World Cup will have been put to bed, and they will be rebooting and looking to their strengths and really trying to gel this team together. Because I think it hasn't, from the outside, it just hasn't quite looked as together as it possibly could be.
Thanks to Sue there. Do you think England are now on the right track, Rosa, after a disappointing World Cup?
I think it's much more positive, and they're playing to their strengths a lot more, and also utilising the whole squad more so than they did in the World Cup. And South Africa was great preparation for them. I mean, they played 3 T20s, 3 ODIs, and a test, and they won everything apart from 1 ODI. And I think that test match preparation was crucial for them. If I'm honest, South Africa probably didn't perform to the standard that they can. But the confidence boost from winning a test match and a 4-day test match, matching the one at the MCG, is crucial, and a lot of important performances from some of the younger players.
Yes, there were some impressive performances by young bowlers in particular.
I mean, Rhiannon McDonald-Gay has been one of the leading figures, albeit how young she is, of women's regional cricket for quite a long time now, especially since the Under-19 World Cup in South Africa. And for her to come in that test match and bowl the way she did in the place of the injured Kate Cross was extremely impressive. And then obviously Lauren Bell with 8 for 76 across the test match was quite special.
Charlie Dean got a hat-trick in one of the matches as well.
Can't be forgetting Charlie Dean. She did indeed. For me, I think she's probably the most underrated player in that England squad. I think as far as the test trio, as we call them, are concerned, Sophie Ecclestone gets a lot of the attention. And don't get me wrong, Sophie Ecclestone is a phenomenal cricketer. But I think Charlie Dean is really starting to play at the same level as her. So I think it's really important that we focus on utilising her in this Ashes series.
And do you think that playing a test match is going to be an advantage for England when the test match comes around?
I mean, I think it will and it won't. I mean, Australia, since that World Cup, haven't played a test match. And obviously we have, so that's a massive advantage. But women play so few test matches that it's not really test cricket. It's kind of played a bit like an ODI match, and I'm sure it will be similar to that in the test match at the MCG. But the confidence boost from the test match previously, as well as some key performances from the young players and also some of the more senior players, will probably give them a bit of an advantage over Australia.
But generally, who do you think are the best prepared team of the two? Australia having just beaten New Zealand and India in ODIs since the World Cup.
I mean, I think Australia edge England ever so slightly because obviously they've been playing in their conditions and it's a home Ashes. They're very used to their conditions. For England, the biggest challenge is going to be adapting to the conditions. And we're not known for being very good at that. But both teams have performed really well in the build-up. Both teams were hurt in the World Cup, so have a bit of a point to prove. And both teams have young players coming through, which I think was one of the missing factors of the last Ashes. I mean, Georgia Voll for Australia, as an example, in that series versus India, first call-up, scored 173 runs across 3 innings, and she is in the squad for the white ball component.
Before we move on to the format of this year's Ashes, I just wanted to ask you about the England squads for the 3 formats. Were there any surprises?
I think it was pretty predictable. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, Sophia Dunkley has faced a lot of criticism. She finds herself in all 3 squads. And Rhiannon McDonald-Gay is probably the standout shock that she is only in the Test squad. And I think that says a lot about her performances in the previous Test match. I think the main players to have a look out for are Maya Bouchier, who finds herself in all three squads, and Kate Cross obviously injured herself in South Africa, injured her back, and is in the ODI and Test squad. So I think every England fan will be hoping that she is fit. But it's their bigger squads than usual. We're taking 18 players, I think, but that's owing to the quite intense schedule.
Yes, that's in marked contrast to the Australian squads, but I guess they can bring players in anyway.
Yeah, for sure. They've also only announced their white ball squad. They're yet to announce their Test squad, which is an advantage they have to home side, which we definitely don't. It's a pretty predictable Australia squad. I mean, you've got the core of Alyssa Healy, who's back from injury, Elise Perry, Beth Mooney, Megan Shute. But you've also got Georgia Voll, which, as I said, is one to really look out for, and a player who might end up winding the England bowlers up a bit.
They've also lost Sophie Molyneux through injury.
I mean, I'm absolutely gutted for Soph. She's been so unlucky in recent years when it comes to injuries, and she is a phenomenal player and is going to be a big miss. But Australia have the luxury that they've got so many talented players that there's always someone who can come in. So although, of course, it's gutting for her and she's a top player, I don't think it will cost them too much.
You mentioned about Elisa Healy. Do you think she'll still be keeping wicket, or will she be fielding?
I don't think they'll risk anything. If they don't think she's fully fit, they won't risk her being out for the whole Ashes. I mean, obviously you've got Beth Mooney in the squad who can stand behind the stumps very capably. Is that word? Very well. I think we'll have to wait and see regarding that one. But to be fair, she did play the Test match last time with 2 broken fingers, so I would not put anything past her.
Well, we'll wait on that one. Now we're going to talk about the format, and I've got four short clips now from 4 different guests. We're going to hear from Jane Powell, a former captain of England and a former England coach in the Ashes. We're then going to hear from Yas Daswani, a batter for Hong Kong. Then Tina Gough, a regular on this podcast, the German all-rounder. And finally from John Aaron, the manager of the American women's team and the American women's under-19 team, who are shortly going to be playing in the World Cup in Malaysia. So let's hear from our 4 guests about the format of the 2025 Ashes.
It's nice. I hope they don't have such a big boundary. And sometimes it is nice playing at the big grounds, but sometimes playing at big grounds can be quite soulless if they don't get a decent crowd. So it depends how it's marketed out in Australia. The last time that a women's international final was played there, I think they got 85,000 people in there. But it sounds crazy, but if they only get 5 to 10,000, it'll feel a bit empty because it's such a massive stadium. So I'm sure the girls will be delighted to be playing at the MCG. I just have reservations, and I think, places like the North Sydney Oval are perfect for women's cricket. The Wacker is a good ground because now the big ground in Perth is the Perth Stadium, and the Wacker has still got that quintessential cricket nature about it with the traditional scoreboard, etc. Those are the grounds that I, as an older person, like and prefer.
Do you like the fact that the women are playing some more Test matches?
Yeah, definitely. It's awesome to see just the contest between bat and ball, and the bowlers actually have a bit more swing and movement, and yeah, it's a different format because you see the women playing a lot of short format games, and you see all the reverses and the sweeps and the innovative shots. But it's good to see some, as my dad would call it, proper cricket. So it's good to see some proper cricket shots as well.
And you're going to have proper cricket, as you say, played at the MCG in a day-night Test match.
Exactly. No, it'll be Australia is always an incredible place to play. So it'll be good to see how the girls play in different conditions.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and having seen the men's game now and the men's Test match, I really hope the MCG gets similar crowds and the standard of cricket that will be on show will definitely deserve the big crowds. So hopefully they'll get them in. I know the tickets are pretty reasonably priced as well. So hopefully it'll be a bit of a repeat of the World Cup final back in 2020 when the MCG was full. So I'm optimistic that they'll get the big crowds in, and I'm really looking forward to the whole series. I quite like this mixed format, actually. I think it's nice having all three formats to try and see who the better team is. I think at some point maybe, I know they have in the men's, they have kind of a few series as well of the shorter format, but I quite like it that the women's format for the Ashes is how it is. It's just a shame there's maybe only one test match. I think 2 or 3 would be better.
I think it's about time they get more than these 1 and 2 test matches. I think the women have proven themselves beyond a reasonable doubt that they can compete among themselves in the extended format of the game. And I think surely the women should be getting more test opportunities to play test matches. Definitely.
Thanks to all our guests there. Rosa, have you got any reservations like Jane has about the women playing at the MCG?
I think it's a really hard balance because obviously as the game grows, you really want the top stadia being used for women's cricket. But I agree. I also heard Kate Cross talking about it, that it's really difficult playing in an empty stadia, especially when it's as big as the MCG. And the MCG, unless it's half full, will feel pretty empty. But hopefully it's being marketed to an extent which means it will be full. I mean, as Tina said, the men's test at the MCG, the incredible crowd, it would be amazing to get some of those people in and have a similar atmosphere.
Yes, well, it sounds from what Tina's saying, and Tina is on the ground. She was at the Australia-India test matches in Melbourne, and she went on to Sydney. She's a person on the inside as such, and she indicates that it is being well publicised in Australia, which augurs well for a big crowd.
It does for sure. I mean, there's been some really creative marketing. The big pink balloon at the ball above the MCG during that test match. There was a double-decker red bus, London-esque, outside of the ground last game. It's been really creative, and although I can't speak for the Australian media from a social media point of view, it's been incredibly well advertised, so hopefully the ticket sales reflect that.
Yes, I've got a copy of the red bus because Tina, my insider, has sent me a photo of the red bus, so I'll be posting that on the Paddock and the Pavilion socials shortly.
It's a really creative idea, and I love the fact that they've brought a piece of London to Australia for the Ashes.
What do you say to Tina and, in fact, all our guests there about the positive vibes on Test cricket? Do you think there should be more than one Test in the format?
100%. I mean, I heard Lauren Winfield-Hill talking about this recently, and I thought what she said was really interesting. That, as Tina said, she loves the multi-format series and the fact that it's a mix of white ball and red ball. And when we're advocating for more test matches, we're not necessarily advocating for the removal of that. I would love for it to be 3 of each. 3 ODIs, 3 T20s and 3 test matches, because that would be genuinely competitive. I think the biggest issue with the test is the fact that it's worth so many points. And then there's not many games to make that up. I mean, you've heard the England players reminding people continuously that we won more games at the last Ashes and we still came out on the bad side of it because of that test match and those 4 points.
Plus, this test is over 4 days. The one at Trent Bridge in 23 was over 5.
It was indeed, but it's day-night, which will probably help a little bit. The ball will be doing a lot. But yeah, I mean, it's disappointing it's not 5 days, that's for sure. But on the other hand, England recently got a result, and I think it was 3 days against South Africa. So it is, and the test match, the men's test matches in Australia haven't been really going to the 5th day. So it is very possible for them to get a result. And hopefully, for everyone involved, it's not a draw.
Plus, there's no warm-up games at all for the test match, going straight into a pink ball 4-day match.
It's a very congested schedule. One which John Lewis was very unhappy about. It's intense. You're jumping from one format to the other, but both teams have big squads. I mean, Australia have the option to bring anyone in they'd like to. It'll be interesting to go from T20s to Test match cricket. Obviously, last time out we started with the Test, then went into the T20s, then went into the ODIs. So it'll be quite a big jump from spending 40 overs on a pitch to a lot more. But it's also quite a different squad. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the squad will be doing some quite significant preparation for that Test match whilst their teammates are out playing the T20s.
You mentioned the tight schedule, and players are going to be jumping on aeroplanes. I mean, Kate Cross with her back and any fast bowler, it's not the ideal thing to be doing, jetting around a fairly large country in Australia.
It's really not, and it's also not good from a workload management perspective. But unfortunately, what's set in stone is set in stone, and hopefully the criticisms of both player bodies and coaches can mean it's a little bit more spread out next time. But hopefully there aren't any serious injuries owing to the workload, especially for our fast bowlers.
Do you think the schedule has been governed by the WPL, which is, I don't actually know, you'll correct me when that starts? Is that tightened the schedule?
I mean, yeah, probably to a certain extent. I think it's probably mainly it's cheaper. And I know that sounds really bad, but if you lengthen out a series, you're having to facilitate both teams for a more significant period. And I think that's probably one of the things that's come down to. We're also heading towards the end of the Aussie summer, which will have limited it slightly. I mean, the men's home Test summer has ended now, and the women's domestic stuff is reaching its conclusion too. So I think there's a lot of factors with probably when the World Cup was that have left it to be played in January, which have led to it having to be quite significantly shorter.
So squad rotation is really going to be important during this 3-week period.
For sure, and thankfully both teams have the luxury of doing that. I'm going to be honest, England haven't historically been very good at that in tight schedules, so hopefully we take advantage of our full squad because all 18 players have proven themselves to that extent and could go out on that pitch and perform. And I think it's also a case of there isn't much time to bounce back. So it's going to be really important from a mentality point of view for both individual players and a team that if they get a string of losses, they can really quickly turn that around, or if they have a run of bad form. So a lot of it is going to be in the management, the captaincy, the coaching to bring out the best in these players.
Talking about wins and losses, I think it's about time we heard from some of our cricketing experts to see what they think the series result is going to be. And first off, we're going to hear back from Yas Daswani, Hong Kong batter, and John Aaron, the manager of the USA women's team and the USA under-19 women's team. And this is what they had to say about the Ashes series.
I think I'd like to see England winning the T20s and the 50 overs again. And as we've discussed before, I think it'll go down to the Test match in terms of who wins overall. I think it would be an 8-8 kind of draw again, with Australia retaining the Ashes, but a tie overall.
I'm looking forward to it very much so. I think the two teams are two exciting teams. They play very competitive cricket. I'm leaning, with all due respect to present company, I'm leaning a bit towards Australia in terms of them. Well, England will do well, I'm sure, in the ODIs. The T20s, I'm favoring Australia, and in the Test match, I'm not a betting guy, but my money would sort of lean towards Australia.
Next up, Rosa, we're going to talk about some of the key players at the 2025 Women's Ashes. And we're going to hear again from our two of our guests, Yas Daswani and Chloe Hill. And this is what they had to say about some of the key players at the 2025 Ashes.
So I think in good form at the moment is the two batters in very good form are Annabelle Sutherland and Maya Bouchier. Annabelle Sutherland, back-to-back hundreds. She's been playing. She's had an incredible summer. Obviously, a really great all-rounder. And Maya, who's fairly new to the side, but has been in. I think she made 100 in her debut. So just definitely somebody to watch. She's very technical, and especially in the test, that'll be something that she'll need to rely on her technique. There's also, Danny Wyatt, who got player of the series last time. Phoebe Litchfield, who you can never count out. I love watching her play, especially T20s and the shorter formats. And then Perry, who is the top run scorer in the WBBL. Those are kind of my top players to watch. And you've got Lauren Bell as well, player of the series against South Africa.
How important do you think is Nat Sciver-Brunt, though, to the England side?
Yeah, I mean, she's such an important member to the team with the bat and ball and her leadership skills. I think the amount of time she has won the game on her own for England, I think, hopefully she's fit for all of the matches ahead for the Ashes, and we'll see her perform with the bat and ball.
Yeah, she just scored the fastest test century in women's test cricket in 96 balls. And I looked up, her test average is 47 and her ODI average is 46.
Yeah, she's a good player.
Thanks there to Yas and Chloe. Rosa, Nat Sciver-Brunt is a key player. She's going to need to do well if England are going to win the Ashes.
I think that's a given. She is so crucial to that team. I mean, as Chloe said, also from a leadership point of view, to back up Heather Knight. If she doesn't perform with bat especially, I think she's significantly more crucial with bat than she is with ball. I think we're probably going to be in trouble.
Who are the other players you think are the most important to both sides?
Yas mentioned Maya Bouchier. I think she's going to be pretty crucial at the top of the order. I think one of the places that England are notorious at struggling is at the top of the order, and the opening batters really making an impact, and they did so really positively in the last Ashes with Danny Wyatt-Hodge as well. I certainly wouldn't want to be John Lewis with that ODI opening batter selection choice. But I also think Charlie Dean, as we've said previously, she had a very good series versus South Africa, and her spin in the Aussie conditions, I reckon, could be pretty crucial. From an Australian point of view, I mean, obviously you've got Annabelle Sutherland, as Yas mentioned, but also, I've mentioned her before, Georgia Vole. I think as young, fresh legs coming into this side, she has the opportunity to really catch the England bowlers off guard, because you've got players like Healy and Mooney and Perry, but the bowlers are used to facing them, whereas Georgia Vole, I think she played here briefly regionally, but apart from that, they haven't got much experience facing her, so that'll be really interesting.
Because she scored a century in her second ODI.
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive way to start things off. But she's definitely one to watch. We talk a lot about young players coming through as being the impact players, and she's definitely an impact player.
And the leading wicket taker and run scorer in the new multi-format Ashes, Elise Perry, will also be significant.
I mean, Elise Perry is genuinely a legend of Australian women's cricket, and there's a reason for that. She is probably their best fielder. She's incredible with bat and she's incredible with ball. So she definitely will be a standout player.
With 6 white ball matches, if one player like Elise Perry or Nat Sciver-Brunt get into form and get a bit of momentum, they can actually almost win matches on their own, can't they?
100%, especially with bat in hand. I think both teams have very strong bowling units, but both sometimes struggle with bat. If you've got a player who can really take the game on and take it long, then they can genuinely win games as a one-person job.
But likewise, if you get out of form, it can be quite difficult to get back in it in such a short period of time.
I mean, 100%. I think that momentum is so difficult to build in such a short space of time. And also from a morale point of view. If you're having a bad run when you've not got much time to turn it around and you're still playing Australia in an Ashes and there's so much external pressures, it will be difficult, but hopefully that's something that both captains can manage.
That's a good point. Also on the captains, England very dependent on the leadership skills of Heather Knight, as we saw at the World Cup.
Yeah, I think Heather will obviously be crucial from that point of view. I'd like to see her using the players around her a little bit more. I'd like to see her utilising that sort of Brunt, Amy Jones behind the stumps, Sophie Eccleston as an experienced bowler to kind of share that load a little bit. But if she has her captaincy hat on, England will be in a pretty good position.
Well, let's hope so. Time now for 3 more predictions on the 2025 Women's Ashes. We've got Tina, Chloe and Sue Strachan to come. And let's begin with Tina.
Well, I want to be neutral, but also I'm always going to support England. So I think England are going to nick it on the Test match. I think it'll be, what is it, 16 points to play for? So
16 points, that's right, yeah. The closest you can get is 10-6. You can either get 8-all or 10-6.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's good that the Test match is kind of heavily weighted, but it means that it could sway either way. But I'd happily go for a 10-6 to England. I'd take that. But I think Australia might have a thing or two to say about that.
I reckon England will definitely, I'm going to back them in the ODIs.
So 2-1 for England in the ODIs.
Yeah.
That gives us a 4-2 lead.
Yeah. And I reckon Australia are going to be competitive and bring it back in the T20s. So go 2-1 to Australia and then the Test match. Oh, where are we going to go in the Test match?
So we're going to go 6-all as we go into the Test match, which should make it exciting when that begins on the 30th of January.
Yeah, I think going into the Test match, I think it's going to be all to play for. And I guess if England get a good start, obviously it's day-nighter, so pink ball, Kate Cross is excellent in the Test match with the ball. Hopefully win the toss, maybe bowl first. Yeah, I back us in the Test match. I reckon we're going to win in 3 days.
So we're going to win then 10-6 then and win the Ashes
10-6,
back.
we'll take that. We'll take our first win in Australia for so many years.
I think Australia are going to win. I think they're going to get 10 of the 16.
That's as close as you can get, unless it's 8-all, isn't it? Anyway, so it's going to be close then.
Yeah, I think it's going to be nip and tuck. I hope it's going to be nip and tuck. I hope the best England squad comes out and plays the best English cricket they can, because I think they're going to need to do that. And I hope that the best Australian squad plays the best Australian cricket, because that's just fabulous to watch. And then we will have a real spectacle of women's cricket. And that's what we want, isn't it?
Thanks there to Tina Gough, Chloe Hill and Sue Strachan. That's all our panel of experts, apart from yourself, Rosa, and we're going to find out your prediction at the end. So far we've had 2 England wins, 2 Australian wins and a tie. So we've covered all bases there. We had a couple of optimists there in Chloe and Tina Gough.
We did, for sure. I love that Tina said, I think Australia are going to have something to say about that. But I agree with what Sue said, that I hope it's a really tight, close, competitive series.
Yeah, Tina was covering herself. She'd just been playing in a European tournament, and in the second week of that tournament, she was doing some commentary work. So I did joke with her on a podcast, which is going to be coming out later this week with Tina, that she was covering herself as a commentator there.
Honestly, you cover one game as a commentator and you become a journalist and media trained. But
Chloe there was optimistic with Kate Cross doing well in the pink ball test.
I mean, if she's fit, there's still a question mark over that. With her swing, she will probably wreak absolute havoc on Australia, and I think that is what everyone involved in English cricket will be hoping for.
So you think they'll be very careful with Kate Cross in the ODIs and to make sure she is fit for the Test match?
100%. I think she's less crucial in those ODIs based on the other bowlers we have, but she would be a massive miss if she was injured for that Test match.
Let's just move to talk about some cricket news. I've got 3 topics down here that are going to challenge you. The England contracts, the 100 pay, and the lack of DRS in the England-South Africa women's test match. Which one of those would you like to go with first?
Let's start with the contracts.
Any surprises?
I don't think particularly. I think the only two standouts are Emma Lamb losing hers. She's really struggled with injury and form and hasn't been involved in the England setup in recent times. So it's not necessarily a surprise, but it's obviously disappointing for her. Hopefully she can rebuild. And also Lindsay Smith is quite interesting that she's not picked anything up, especially with Beth Heath, Rihanna McDonald-Gay and Izzy Wong picking up development contracts. Given her involvement in the squad in recent times, she'll probably be disappointed not to have put pen to paper on any deals.
Yeah, quite surprising when you're picked for the Ashes and then told you haven't got a contract.
For sure. I mean, that might have been a decision she's made. Obviously, we don't know that, but it's definitely an interesting one. I don't see why you wouldn't put her on a 1-year contract. The other thing to point out is I'm very surprised that Sarah Glenn is only on a 1-year contract. She is a player who has very much cemented her place in the England side, and she's a very important player. So that doesn't really go very well with me.
Clearly, Nat Sciver-Brunt and Heather Knight both got 2-year contracts. They're going to be carrying on for the 2026 T20 World Cup in England.
Why wouldn't you? I mean, it's a home World Cup. You might as well give it a crack and then maybe potentially go out on a high. I think that's been one of the headline makers, but I'm not particularly surprised that they've both signed on for 2 years.
Plus, you've got the Olympics not too far away in 2028.
I mean, we'll see. It is quite a long way away. But you never know. From a batting point of view, if they wanted to, they definitely both could be there. But we'll see how things go.
What's your next choice of those three then?
Let's jump to the DRS.
Yeah, that was fun, wasn't it? Well, not fun if you were South Africa.
I mean, yeah, I think for the umpires, it was really difficult because they were both quite inexperienced umpires in the grander scheme of things. So to put them in a position where they're so used to having that system in place and to take it away was probably the downfall for a lot of decisions. I think it's a tad ironic that it was most negative for South Africa. I mean, I don't think I need to mention the wicket which was reviewed, which felt like it was reviewed, but there's no reviews. Absolutely baffling. But yeah, really not a positive step as far as women's cricket is concerned.
Yeah, I read that South Africa had had 21 internationals in 2024 and every single one had had DRS apart from the women's test match.
It just feels like a really odd decision. Because even from a cost-cutting point of view, they still had the technology on a certain level because they could check run-outs and catches, etc. So it just felt really odd. I would love to hear someone who was behind the scenes making that decision. I'd love to hear their genuine reasoning for it, because on the surface it just looks strange.
Surely that shouldn't be allowed to happen again in a women's test match or any women's international.
For sure, but especially a test match. It's a long time to go without DRS, especially when the rest of the series has had DRS, which makes it even more baffling. But hopefully the ICC ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Well, let's hope so. The final topic then, unless you've got more to talk about, is the 100 pay.
Oh, the 100 pay. Anyone who came across me on the day that was announced will know I was not very happy about it. And I think one of the really interesting thing about it is the amount of women's players who are reposting the PCA statement being very negative about it. I do not see how you can create a competition claiming to have an equal playing field, then put your hands up after a couple of years and say, it hasn't been equal yet. We appreciate that. So we're going to freeze the men's salaries until the women's salaries are equal, and then have an even bigger gap. it is genuinely mind-blowing. And I understand why they've done it on one level, because the men's 100 needs to get some bigger stars over, and I appreciate that. But the disproportionate distribution of that cash flow injection, I mean, the top band, there's now a £135,000 gap between the highest paid men's players and the highest paid women's players. And at the bottom, that gap's £21,000. It's just not acceptable.
Yeah, from a per percentage increase, I mean, this might have not been that palatable, but surely if they were going to increase the bands for the top players, the percentage increase should have been the same for the men and the women at worst.
100%, and it really wasn't. And also,
60-30, I think.
Yeah, my concern is at the top, but it's also at the bottom. The players who are earning £10,000 for that tournament, there's not a lot of money in women's cricket, especially for the players who are going to be on those contracts. It's a really crucial salary for them. And yes, the ECB have brought in regulation regarding the minimum pay for women's cricketers in this country. But if you're a rookie player and you're trying to live in London and you're only on 28 grand, it's not ideal, you know. So hopefully they appreciate their mistake and hope to rectify it for next season.
Well, hopefully they'd listened, and when the hope for investment in the 100 comes in, then the bands will then be made equal.
I mean, you've really got to hope. I think a lot of the women's players I've spoken to aren't necessarily furious at the fact that they're not equal. They're furious at the percentage increase and also the lack of investment in the lower salaries on the women's side and the gap from that point of view. They appreciate that on the surface it could be quite difficult to make them equal to the men, even though, you know, 1 ticket, 2 games, TV deal for both tournaments. So there isn't really a reason for it not to be equal. But it's a massive problem which needs rectifying.
Well, thanks for those thoughts. It's now time for final reflections and your own prediction. Before we get your prediction, I just wanted to ask you, how important do you think this Women's Ashes series is for the game of cricket?
I think it's massive. You know, when we talk about the growth of women's sport in recent years, it has been reflected here with the crowds for England women's cricket team. But I'd love to see some bigger crowds in Australia for this series. I think with the rise of the Matildas in women's football and the AFL, cricket is kind of sinking a little bit. So hopefully this Ashes series can work to rise cricket back up as far as the women are concerned.
And it's going to be important for it to be competitive as well.
100%. I think one of the most positive things about the last Ashes was the fact that England were attempting that great escape, and it also aligned almost perfectly with the men's team's great escape. So it's a shame that both series aren't aligning again, but hopefully we can get some good, wow-watch competitive cricket.
Cricket, which I'm sure you'll be trying to watch amongst your studies for your mock examinations, I think.
I will indeed. I'll probably miss out on the ODI series, but after that, I'm back in business.
Yeah, the ODIs which start the series, they're sort of bedtime, aren't they? And the T20s are very good times. They're sort of like 9 o'clock in the morning, 8:30, aren't they?
They are. So hopefully I'll be watching all of them, but definitely won't be watching cricket at 11 p.m. the night before my mock exams. I don't think that would be a particularly wise decision.
No, not a good idea. So, time is now for you to give us your thoughts and predictions for the 2025 Women's Ashes. And I want not just the final score, I want the ODI score, the T20 score, the Test match result, all three.
Of course. I'll start with the ODIs. I'm going to be honest, I think Australia are probably going to clinch the ODIs 2-1. But what I think will happen is Australia will win those first 2 ODIs and then England will win the final one. I'm being really specific here. As far as the T20s are concerned, I think England will clinch them 2-1. Kind of as a bit of a bounce back from winning that last ODI. And the test match, I mean, it's anyone's game. So you're going into the test match, and if someone wins that dictates the result. But I'm going to be honest, I think Australia are probably going to win that test match. But we never know. We will see. We will see.
So what's the score in Rosa Talks Ball?
10-6 to Australia.
Which is the closest you can get if it's not 8-all, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I don't want it to be a tie again. I don't need that energy.
But seriously, do you think the fact that England beat Australia 2-1 in the ODIs and the T20s, albeit it's 2 years ago, will give them that belief that they can beat Australia?
100%. I think there'll be plenty of belief, and I think they'll all be close games. But I think it will take us a second to adjust to conditions, and that will probably be what dictates the ODI series over confidence or over the performance of the players.
I guess we've just got to hope that Nat Sciver-Brunt scores a century in every match.
We can always dream, but I back Nat always to do something unbelievable.
So the final scores on the Paddock and the Pavilion panel: Chloe Hill went for an England 10-6, Tina Gough, England 10-6, John went for Australia, John Aaron, Yas Daswani went for the 8-all draw, and Sue Strachan went for Australia 10-6, and then Rosa of Rosa Talks Ball goes for Australia 10-6. So it looks like we're going to go for, on this show, it's going to be 10-6 to Australia. Thank you very much, Rosa, for being on the Paddock and the Pavilion once again. Best wishes to you for 2025. Nearly forgot the year then. Best of luck for your podcast, which has been nominated for an award.
Yeah, it has, which was a happy surprise. So we'll see how that goes.
And what award have you been nominated for, and for what competition?
I've been nominated in the Sports Podcast Award for the Best Cricket Podcast and the Best Equality and Social Impact Podcast.
Well, good luck with that, and good luck with those mock examinations. So you've got your A-levels coming up in June. Is it May, June?
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't come around too fast, but there's always a bit of cricket to keep you going, isn't there?
Well, let's hope so. I hope we can have another chat prior to the season starting, when we can talk about the Women's Ashes and the Tears.
Yep, indeed. I look forward to it. Thank you very much for having me.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.